I am here with Darryll Stinson, who is an entrepreneur, a speaker, and suicide survivor. How are we doing today, Darryll?
Living my best life. Excited to jump in and chat with you.
Love it, man. I love it, man. I mean, that's a powerful statement right there that you just started off with. I mean, that's something that we're really all striving for is living our best life day in and day out. Um, and it's incredible that you're feeling that way, man. I love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the life that was given me. So, from a gratitude standpoint, it's my best life. But also, from a conversation as we talk about athletes, there's a time where I lived my current life as if it was second best to my former life as an athlete.
Right.
And life was like downhill. We use this term in athletics called the glory days.
Yeah.
And I wasn't content with my glory days being behind me
Mhm.
instead of in front of me. And so, yeah, I'm living my best life.
I love it, man. And it's so interesting talking about athletes and mental health. And I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why I've transitioned the podcast a little bit more talking about that and connecting mental health with sports, because it really dictates a lot how athletes live not only within the time that they're an athlete, but also like post career as well. And I actually just had an amazing conversation with Reggie Walker. I don't know if you've ever heard of any of his stuff, but he explained the idea of a war mindset that football players really have to get into before they play. And you were a defensive end at Central Michigan University. And quite honestly, right after that conversation that I had with him, it made me look completely differently at football players mainly, but just like athletes in that mindset that you have to get into to compete.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody's has their different ways and philosophies, but there's definitely some similarities to war and
Right.
sports in general and the mindset that we coach elite athletes to have. So, one of the phrases that's common is, I put my blood, my sweat, my tears into
Yeah.
everything, and that's like very much a war term.
Mhm.
And you got enemy is the opponent. And so there's a lot of parallels. Obviously, it's not the same thing. It's not life or death unless you're playing like I was with like well, a very severe injury that could lead to death.
Right.
But still, it is very competitive, and you got to put yourself in that mindset in order
Mhm.
to have an edge on your opponent.
Right, exactly. And just from that conversation, other conversations that I've had about this subject, it is so interesting to hear, especially looking at, different things that we've been seeing in the media recently, especially with the Olympics and the pressure that it has on those types of athletes. And it's been also interesting to hear what the public says about that stuff because it's so new that people are like, well, what is wrong with these people? Why can't they just go out there and play? Like this is your job. But in all reality, it just all that pressure. Like there was something that happened with the Red Sox and Yankees where a fan threw a ball at Alex Verdugo, a Red Sox player, and he said right in front of the podium, he's like, "I'm a human being, but I just play baseball for a job." He's like, "But I'm just like you and I."
hmm Yeah, that's so crazy, man. And there's so many instances like that. And I'm glad that technology has allowed us to see a little bit more of what goes on and how athletes are being treated. Because I think there's always an unfair narrative around athlete behavior versus fan based behavior,
Oh yeah,
where we give fans more grace than we give athletes because we expect more out of athletes as leaders than we do out of fans.
yeah.
But I think we're all humans and we all have potential and no one's better than anybody. So while, there is a responsibility that comes with the public platform, uh, you also have to be able to give them the same grace that you want for yourself. Because if anybody followed you around with the camera,
Yeah.
saw you at your worst moment, and I
Right.
think that's what technology has been able to capture. It's like, man,
Hmm.
if you see an athlete throw something and, like they're not just doing this because they're a hothead or they're not sound-minded individual. They're doing this
Right.
probably because they're fed up for how they've been treated, and that one little thing that someone did just kind of set them on edge. So, it's
Yeah.
just something we got to be aware of.
Exactly. And I think the year of 2020 is really when it was a lot introduced to people. Just the idea of mental health was so much more amplified by the fact that people were anxious about the unknown. They were anxious about getting germs from other people. They were anxious about what their job or families looked like, if they were able to see their families or not. And
hmm
it was definitely a year where, a lot of people learned about themselves, but also went through a lot of trials and tribulations. And I always like to ask my guests, what was the biggest lesson you learned during 2020?
The biggest lesson I learned in 2020. I have not thought about that. Um, Man, I don't know. I'm kind of stunned a little bit because I learned so much,
Right.
from
It's tough.
2020, and I
To
reflect every
pinpoint.
day. So I learn something every day.
Right.
And so, to look at the whole year and be like, well, what was my greatest lesson from last year? Um, I think from a personal standpoint, honestly, it was recognizing how small I was playing and how much my view of myself contributes to the success that I experience in my life.
Right.
And I think it just became very apparent during a worldwide pandemic, knowing that I had a lot of value to offer the world from the athletic industry, who
Mhm.
was now becoming more aware of mental health and more public with it, and me having a book that addresses that and more, while also just being a person who's been through trauma and lows and depression, and you
Mhm.
had all these spikes of people being depressed from quarantine, Zoom
Right.
fatigue, and
Mhm.
at home with kids, and divorce going up, and alcoholism consumption going up. People trying to just cope with the stress, and I felt like I had strategies and perspectives that could help people,
Mhm.
and being able to see myself that way is a shift I had to make, because I'm just like, man, people kind of know this stuff. This isn't like groundbreaking information, but it is to some people who never experienced it before.
Right.
And like, I remember my wife was just she was kind of acting funny, and I don't know, she was eating a lot, and something was just off. And I remember like observing her one day. I was like, man, she's depressed. I know that she's depressed because
Right.
that's what I did when I was depressed. I noticed those behaviors.
Mhm.
And I was talking to her like late at night, and I was like, hey, she's like, man, I don't know what's going on. I was like, man, you're depressed. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, this, and I started to kind of explain how I know, and she was like, you're exactly right.
Right.
And so, how you see yourself determines how you show up in life.
Oh yeah.
If you see yourself as invaluable, if you see yourself as inadequate, you show up that way. And the worst part about that is that the results that you want on the inside, the way that you see yourself affects you actually experiencing that in your life.
Right.
And so if you want to be a person who gets paid high dollar, if you want to be a person whose voice is respected, if you want to be a person whose podcast is downloaded because of how much value it offers, you have to see yourself as a person of value. And if
Right.
you're struggling with low self-esteem and confidence, and you're second guessing yourself, like,
Right.
you're never going to step up like you know that you could if you had complete confidence in yourself. And when I
Mhm.
tell this to people, they're like, oh, okay, how do you get rid of the fear? How do you get rid of the nervousness? How do you get rid of? And I'm like, you don't get rid of it. You do it in spite of it,
Mhm.
right? Like, I get nervous. Like, before, we were just talking before we like officially start recording this podcast, of like essential oils is something that's new in my mental health and self-care routine. And and it centers me before I get up there and speak. It helps me to ground myself in my true identity, who I am, so that when I share, I share from a more powerful, grounded place.
Right.
And these are things that people need to do, and I had to recognize that. And I don't know, 2020 taught me that lesson, that I was, I didn't have low self-esteem, but my identity did not match the goals that I had in life.
That's
And so I had to
interesting.
play bigger.
Right. That's so interesting. And I appreciate you sharing that story about your wife because it's something where especially people around us, even as close as like our significant other, it really is tough for them to fully realize like what is going on because there's not a lot of people when they get those types of feelings when you feel a little bit off you don't fully know how to pinpoint it unless you've really dealt with it for a long period of time or unless somebody notices it and brings it up to you uh, and especially during that time of 2020 there's a lot of why me, why is this happening to me, and I was somebody who got my college semester cut short. And I had these freshmen in college who were saying, why is this happening to me? And I'm like, in my mind, like, there's these seniors who just got their entire rest of their college experience just like cut off. And it was interesting to see how people really put themselves in a perspective of this is happening to everybody. But I find it so interesting hearing about, that identity shift. And that's one of the biggest things that we all need to figure out is what sort of value do we bring to this life and to other people around us.
Correct. And value is determined uh by the person who's receiving
Mhm.
the value. And what I and again, you can't dictate your value based upon how other people perceive it. It's the old adage that and I'm gonna kind of butcher the story, but the guy, gives his daughter a car and tells her to go, sell the car, and sees what it worth. She goes to a shop, they tell her I give you $500 for it. She goes to another shop, they say I give you 1,000. He comes back, he says go over to the antique collector, and she goes over to the antique collector, and they'll give her like, I don't know, 20, 50, 80,000, however many it was, because that person valued it more. And if we don't recognize that people are kind of like perceiving the value, and it doesn't mean that they control the value we have. It just means we have to get around the people who value what we have to offer. And the problem is that we do two things when we start to have esteem issues and confidence issues that are impacting the life we want. We either start to compare, and we look at your gift,
Mhm.
your highlight reel, your social media success, and then we compare your strengths to my weaknesses, your highlight reel to my real life.
Right.
And then we start to have issues of, am I valuable or not? The other thing that starts to happen is people start to devalue us, right? Like I don't like you, I don't think you're cool, I don't agree with you. And then we start to think, well, maybe I don't have anything to offer. It's like, no, that person just thinks differently. Maybe
Right.
they're not your assignment. Maybe you're not called to impact and influence their life. But
Right.
I'm telling you, there's a whole tribe of people out here in this world that resonate with you and are wanting to hear your story, wanting to hear your voice, wanting to hear your perspective, wanting to hear how you process information, wanting to hear how you think through problems and work through scenarios, because they too are in that same journey. And so you just got to find your tribe, and you got to stop comparing yourself to other people. Find what's unique about you and enjoy that, celebrate that,
Mhm.
put that out there for people to see.
I love it, man. And I feel like it's really tough right now in our society, especially with everything that's going on with social media, just that comparison. I've seen it all throughout my life, all throughout my generation. It's I've dealt with it a lot as well. As we spoke about a little bit before the podcast, I mean, that was one of the biggest things that I struggled with throughout college is comparing myself to others and, changing myself to please other people's perception of me and, to fit in. And I've had some other conversations with other people, with other guests that I've had on the podcast of like, what is normal? Like, there's no real normal other than what you perceived as normal. And
Oh yeah.
that's such an interesting subject. And just like the whole understanding of, I think it's also very interesting as well. Middle school and high school, like the cool kids between the not cool kids, like it's really just our perception of like what those people wear. Um, but it really comes back to the whole idea of it all depends on the experiences that we have throughout life that make us the people
Yeah.
who we are.
Yeah. Exactly. And man, I just wish I could just shake a school like completely loose to understand that dynamic. And in fact, I've done a couple of virtual keynotes in the pandemic, and one of the ones that I did was called Operation Authenticity.
That's cool.
And it was this talk around walking people through how are authentic are they really being. Because
Mhm.
I think if everyone could learn how to be more authentic to themselves, some of this like bullying that goes on in schools,
So
low
bad.
self-esteem, depression issues, relational issues, kids getting picked on, feeling lonely at the lunch table,
Mhm.
cool kids, not cool kids. A lot of that stuff will go away if people just start being more authentic.
Mhm.
But the problem is that like we get to school and we start shooting a whole movie, a full
Yeah.
production.
Yeah.
Nobody goes to school and talks about like real stuff. You go to school and you try to be cool and be class clown.
Right.
Like I know because I was it, right?
Mhm.
And I knew
You
how to
fit
play the
in.
game, and I was successful at it. But I learned it because I felt like an outcast,
Right.
And I know we talked about maybe getting into this, but rejection will make you question who you are.
Yep.
Rejection, if you don't understand how to properly assess it, will feel like it's an enemy instead of a friend.
Yeah.
And what we have to learn to do as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as human beings is to properly understand rejection, why it comes into our life, and how we can use it as a catalyst for our success. Because here's what I know: if you do anything of value, if you do anything of service, you are going to feel this thing of rejection. Period.
Mm-hmm.
You're human. It's a part of our experience. I've never met one human being on this planet who hasn't felt some type of rejection, whether it was I didn't get invited to drinks with my coworkers, or I got cut from the high school team,
Right.
or I launched my podcast and I had 0 listeners on the first day. Like I felt this rejection. And we take that and we allow that sting to keep us from moving forward, to keep us from making friends.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying to people is if you understand that sometimes rejection is projection
Yeah.
or protection, then oh my gosh, think of how you can still move forward because you won't take it personally. You'll put it in different buckets and you'll keep it moving.
Right. And that's such a tough idea, especially for now with so much with social media. I mean, when you were talking about rejection, I mean it's even something as small as somebody not opening your Snapchat. Like honestly.
Anything.
And that's something that I dealt with a lot as well. Like let's say for instance, I Snapchat a girl with the intention that she was into me and then she leaves me on red, which essentially like in my mind, that's like she's ignoring me. And then you make up
Yeah.
all these hypotheticals in your mind and you start beating yourself up. Oh, what do I need to change myself to so then she does like me more than some other people. And it's this whole idea and this whole sort of argument that you have with yourself. But you brought up this idea of projection. I find it so fascinating of just what you project in your reality and what how you look at different situations and make up these different ideas in your mind. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so the concept comes from when I was in the 3rd grade. My mother put me in accelerated learning classes because she noticed that I was a very smart kid. And this meant where I'm from in Jackson, Michigan, that I was one of 2 Black students in an all white class. And there wasn't anything wrong with this. I was very smart. I was one of the smartest kids in the class, actually. People was cheating off my tests. They laughed at my jokes. They called me goon because I was like this big, goofy, goony guy.
Love it.
And I thought that since they like me, everybody must like me, charismatic, I'm smart, I'm handsome, everything. And so one day I'm walking down the hallway and then I got that nasty wooden bathroom pass that's disgusting that everyone takes to the bathroom back in the day. And I see this group of Black students in the hallway circled together laughing hysterically. And so I'm like, man, what's so funny? I want to like get in on the jokes. So I walk over to them. I'm like, what's so funny? And they don't answer me. And I'm like, man, I know that they heard me. Like, I'm tall. I've always been tall, right? I'm like, so they hear me and they just ignore me. And so I'm like, man, maybe they was just clowning and didn't hear me. So I spoke up. I said, what y'all over there laughing about? And before I could even finish my sentence, one of the kids turned towards me. He looked at me. He said, "Yours was funny, white boy." And I'm like, white boy.
Yeah.
They all started laughing, and I knew that they were not laughing with me. They were laughing at me.
Yeah.
I walked back to my classroom with my head down, and I started to ask around the school, why did these students call me a white boy when I'm clearly Black, like
Right.
extra Black, not like mixed. I'm super Black. I was so Black that they would make these jokes in class when the lights go off. They say, "Where'd Darryll go? All we can see is his eyes and his teeth." And so
Wow, that's crazy.
I found out that I was known in our school as the Black kid that quote unquote talks and acts white. And that was hurtful to me because no one told me personally, and apparently everyone knew except for me. And I took that personal, and I talk about it in TEDx talk, so I won't go too much into it. But I took that to mean that who I was authentically wasn't enough to be liked or loved by other people.
Right.
So I started to change everything about myself in order to fit in with this crowd, change the way I talk, the way that I, um, uh, behaved. I started skipping school, selling drugs, having sex with girls, all in attempts to fit in with this Black community. And it worked. They welcomed me into the culture. I had a Black girlfriend. I was like one of the most popular kids in school. They called me a different type of goon. I was now street tough guy goon instead of goofy lame goon.
Right.
And the problem is that deep down inside, I knew it wasn't me who they were accepting. It was who I was pretending to be. And so you fast forward, I'm being inauthentic all my life through college, and I get through my injury at CMU, go through a depression, go through the suicidal attempts, have this rebirthing experience in a psychiatric care facility. And then I start to look at my life in retrospect. Then I start to begin this journey of who am I authentically? What laugh is really mine? What events do I really like? What music do I really enjoy if I wasn't pressured by other people's opinions? And I started to sort of peel off these layers of other people's opinions, people making fun of me, my old pain, my insecurities, and kind of like peeling back this layer of onion until I got to this core of like, yeah, this is Darryll.
Yeah.
This is me. And when I got to that place, I started to see those students through a different light. And I'm like, oh man, they didn't have the courage to be their authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
So since they weren't courageous enough to do anything different than what their peers thought was acceptable, they projected their fears and insecurities onto me in the form of mockery and jokes. And so they talked bad about me to make them feel better about themselves.
That's how it goes.
And that's what people do. And when you have that perspective, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known that. Like I wish I would have known that people will talk down about you to make themselves feel better. I wish I would have known that people who hate on you is probably because they're jealous of the progress you're making. I've never got judged by people who were further than me.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. It's always somebody beneath me trying to grab my feet, pull me down, keep me from climbing. And I have to decide what I'm going to do with that. Am I going to internalize that and be like, oh, they're making fun of me. Oh, they're not inviting me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're not buying my product or my service. Oh, I don't have anything to offer. What's wrong with me?
Right.
Versus, let me assess this scenario and see if this could be a form of projection.
Right.
I'm not saying it is every time. I'm not saying that we don't accept responsibility. I'm not saying that we can't learn from others of people's opinion and make adjustments. All of that is possible. But what I'm saying is that more times than not, the sting of rejection we feel is coming from haters who are jealous of our progress.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it, man. And I mean, that's a situation where you probably look back now and you're like, that made me who I am today. This is exactly why I have the purpose that I do, to help other people not feel like this. And it's really tough when you have to ask yourself that question, like, what is my actual laugh? I mean, that's just a crazy question. And when you have that feeling of when you're looking at yourself in the mirror and really that deep sort of moment with yourself of, this isn't me at all. Like, this is not who I am. And for people who are having to try and paint a picture of themselves which isn't them to please other people, how were you able to get through that, and what advice do you have for those people?
Ask me the question again.
So for people who are going through similar idea of having to change who they are to please other people, what advice do you have for them, and how were you able to get through that experience?
My advice is, it's better to be real and be rejected than to be fake and be accepted.
Mm-hmm.
That's the truth. You have to anchor yourself in that belief so that you make decisions accordingly. What we think is that being inauthentic protects us from pain, protects us from failure, protects us from rejection. And it might, but it also causes you harm, causes you to lose your authentic voice, makes you feel depressed because you know that you're not showing up, makes you feel like an imposter. And I think some people have imposter syndrome, not because they're in a room full of expert geniuses and they feel like they don't belong. But a lot of people feel like they're an imposter. You ready? Because they are imposing, like they are not being themselves.
Yeah.
So of course you feel like an imposter because you're trying to be somebody you're not. So you have to anchor in this, but you have to tell yourself, listen, in this sales call, I'd rather be real and be rejected than fake and be accepted. In this relationship, I'd rather be real and be rejected than be fake and be accepted. Because if I'm fake and I'm accepted, I got to keep up that act for the duration of the relationship. But if I'm real and they reject me, then at least I know what it is and I can get to the next person, the next call, the next prospect, the next relationship where people actually accept me. And again, you don't take this and be unwise and not grow and be a jerk and be like, oh, I'm just gonna be a jackass and not make any changes because people don't understand me. Don't do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like assess the situation and go, what's authentic that I like and I enjoy that I just gotta never lose, and then what maybe do I need to tweak? Maybe my presentation sounds a little different. And so it's a balance, but I'm telling you, more times than not, people just got to be bold enough and courageous enough to do it. So I anchored myself in that belief, and I tell people that same thing. The other thing is, how do you really kind of find yourself? What's authentic to you? Things like that, man. You just kind of like trial and error. And it helps if you go back to the original place where you lost you. So if you close your eyes and you took a deep breath and you went back to a painful moment of rejection in your life, what was an earlier remembrance of rejection? So for me, one of the ones that comes up is I remember being in this basement party, rolling dice with a bunch of people who were in the streets,
Mm-hmm.
and I laughed. And my natural laugh is very high pitched, and it's kind of embarrassing to be a big, muscular, tough black guy and have this high pitch laugh. And I remember just like laughing uncontrollably because of whatever happened.
Right.
And and they looking at me, they're like, man, you lame. Like, why you laughing like that? And that was where I was like, oh, that's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's not appropriate. Oh, I don't like that I laughed like that. So the next time I laughed, it was like instead of going, I went,
Right.
you see the difference?
Yeah.
I started to lose myself.
Yeah. Just not
And the
happen.
crazy thing about it, you talked about this, the very thing that made them reject me is what make other people accept me. The crazy thing about it is that after I peeled off those layers and I started to kind of show up with my more authentic self, because by the way, when you find it and you're like, okay, this is more authentic, you got to just kind of let yourself test the waters because your body has built up this wall that says if you're authentic, you're going to experience pain. And so what you have to do once you identify that's your wall is you have to kind of let it go. It's going to feel scary as crap. I remember the first time I laughed as my authentic in a public setting, like I literally went home, like feeling like everybody in that room, like thought the same way about me, as when it happened to me when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even talk to anybody. I just made that assumption because it felt that way. So you just have to, by faith, like make the choice to bring your authentic self into the world, knowing that you may get rejected and you may feel some fear because it's an old place of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, the more I do it. And so now what I love is I do podcasts and speaking and I got my authentic self. And people actually like my high pitched laugh. They think it's contagious. They think it makes them laugh. And sometimes they are laughing at me, but oh well, it's not from a condescending, like you weirdo standpoint. It's just
Right.
like that is hilarious that this big dude laughs like that,
Yeah.
you know?
Exactly.
And so it's a advantage for me and it makes me different and it sets me apart. But society tried to choke out my authenticity.
Right. And that's so tough about because we're always so told, you have to find a way to differentiate yourself in the job market. There's with so much competition, you need to find a way to be unique. But like with the whole idea of normal, it's so hard to be able to get out of your comfort zone and that fear of not living up to that normal that society sort of paints. And I
Mhm.
mean, I even dealt with something very similar throughout school. I would stand in front of my closet for 10 to 15 minutes and just try to find a shirt that I wouldn't get comments on. And that like and it's crazy how like simple that seems. But like
Mm,
but then once I got into my that happened in my freshman year of college, my senior year of college, I remember I told people this and they looked at me like I had four heads. I'm like, what's weird is I'm wearing this Red Sox shirt because it makes me happy. I love the Red Sox. And they're like, and they go, okay, like that's cool. Who cares? And I'm like, actually, like this is amazing for me. Like I actually like figured out like how to be myself, and it's okay.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, especially like being your type of personality where you're very nice, you're high energy and especially like a soft-hearted type of guy. I mean, I can only imagine that type of fear of rejection or having to fit in on the football field. And
Hmm.
especially when you were in like a college setting, like I had massive anxiety throughout college and tried to fit in. And so how was
Hmm.
that experience during your time on the football team at Central Michigan University?
Well, my personal experience in college on the football team, none of this. I mean, let me say it this way. What I was gonna say is that I didn't really have that issue because I was still keeping up the whole performance and changing who I was. So I didn't have any issues with rejection because everybody loved me because I was a super chameleon that fit in with everybody.
Mhm.
Um, so I really didn't start having those problems until like after I started to peel back the layers, and then people are like, "Oh, why you changing up? Why you switching it up? Why you ain't hanging out with us? Or why you acting funny?" And it's like I'm not acting funny, I'm acting original,
Who I
And
am.
so I didn't really have that, but I will say this: there were moments that I knew uh, I was unfulfilled because I was faking who I was, and it was hard for me to enjoy life because I knew I wasn't really living life.
Mhm.
And that's where a lot of the depression came from, was that I had been doing this since the third grade, my man, and
That's crazy.
I couldn't come out in college and be like, "So guys, I'm really not tough." Yeah, I am tough from like a don't fight me type of standpoint,
Yeah.
but I'm not crazy to where I want to like shoot somebody because they steal something from me, and that's the narrative that comes from the neighborhood I grew up in, and that's who I was trying to act like. And even I listened to old raps that I did back then. I still got some of them on my garage band. I had the whole studio and everything. And the things that I rapped about, I'm like, man, that wasn't me. And as there was times where I'm rapping about certain things, I'm like, man, I'm just saying this because this is the cool thing to say. I don't really feel this, but I can be like, hey guys, I'm not. This isn't cool to me anymore. you
So are those on
know,
SoundCloud and YouTube? Because right after this conversation, I'm gonna go and search them up and listen.
so all the old stuff is gone. I think I do have like one or two tracks that are new on all the listening platforms.
I love it.
One's Defy the Statistics, the other's called We All Need Hope. But it's all positive stuff and it's all authentic to who I am today. But all the rest of the stuff is on my hard drive, and I don't know. You pay me enough money, I might release like one.
I love
There
it.
is one online somewhere, and you have to know where to find it. It's not like a published song,
Right.
but I just thought about this, and oh no, but again, that was post my transformation, so it's still my authentic voice. So sorry, got to pay
Well,
for
I'll go
that.
into the dark web. I'll figure it out some way, somewhere. No, I'm
No
just
way. All
kidding.
on my hard drive. Unless you are super genius, you're not getting
I love it, man.
it.
Well, like I mean, it's really cool to hear that like you were able to express yourself within music, like with this new chapter as well, and that you're
Yeah.
honest with yourself and you have that awareness of really thinking back of how you used to express yourself in that art form. I
Mhm.
find that super interesting. But
Yeah.
going through that experience in college, that depression, and especially with your season-ending back surgery, explain that experience and really some of the biggest lessons that you learned from that that's made you into the person that you are today.
Okay, let me fast track through some of these lessons because there's a lot. We have a short amount of time. Lesson number one that I learned is there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. So when I first ruptured my disc and had a pinched nerve, I thought I was hurt. You can play through hurt, you can play through pain. So I was playing through it, but I was really injured.
Hmm.
I needed repair. I needed rest. Working was only going to continue to make it worse and harm my body more. And in the long term, that's dumb. And even in the short term, it's not smart because you start to compensate with other muscle groups and you start to have imbalances in your body. So it messes everything up. So that's lesson number one is know the difference between being hurt and being injured. Okay. Lesson number two that I learned is learn that vulnerability is a Batman signal for love. And if you really want more love from society and from relationships and from human beings, you got to send a stronger vulnerability signal.
Hmm.
And so when I started to notice, like, oh my gosh, there's a disconnect between uh, what people say to me and how I feel about me. You know, people are enamored by the fact that I'm on national television and playing against, top athletes, and we're on the track to win a MAC championship. And Eric Fisher's projected to go first round of the draft, and Antonio Brown is projected to leave early and go to the NFL. And Dan Lefevre is being compared to Tim Tebow. And you're a part of this. Oh my gosh, Darryll, you're so amazing. And you're next. And I'm feeling like I'm not being my authentic self. I don't know who I am. Y'all saying y'all like me. Y'all only like me because I'm playing sports. And I never communicated that this disconnect, this distance that I felt in my relationships caused me not to like myself, caused me to feel depressed and not really want to be here on this planet anymore. And so I sent out a small vulnerability signal. I said, you know, going through a tough time, pray for your boy. For every dark night, there's a brighter day. I'm putting these deep quotes and expecting people to just know what I'm going through. And then I'm getting more depressed and more hurt because people are not like calling me, texting me, hitting me up.
Right.
My vulnerability signal wasn't strong enough.
Hmm.
And in order to be fully loved, you have to be fully known. And I wasn't fully known. I wasn't being vulnerable and transparent enough about my struggle. The way that somebody responds to someone saying, for every dark night, there's a brighter day, is far different to how they respond to, I'm having thoughts about ending my life.
Right.
And so I needed to be vulnerable and put that out there, not worried about what people's, you know, perceptions of me were going to be, but be more worried about being healed than being held in high esteem, I guess.
Hmm.
And so that's a lesson that I learned is that when I want more love in my life, I send more vulnerability to the world. Let me stop there because those are master classes in themselves.
I love it, man. Yeah, I mean, those are huge, and a lot of those words really resonated with me because I'm the type of person that throughout the last 3 to 4 years, I put out a lot of like those types of quotes, those types of sayings, and I felt a very similar feeling of, well, do people really care about me? But it's the whole you just assuming that people are going to be able to transcribe and get the puzzle pieces exactly right, so then they can understand. And it's also tough as well because at least for myself, when I went through those tough times, I was around a lot of younger people who didn't fully and weren't able to fully grasp how I was feeling. And at times, depression and anxiety is looked at as a weakness, and you're different. And that even gives you even more anxiety that you're not fitting in. And that's definitely a hard feeling to have. And so I read that you were able to go to Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit and get your second chance on life and really figure out, how much life mattered and to try and live each day to the fullest.
Yeah, yeah, and I had this transformation in the psychiatric unit where I found my faith, but I also found hope.
Hmm.
And I think till then I had no hope. I felt hopeless. And when you feel hopeless, you feel helpless. And I felt both. And and when I had that hope, I say it this way, man. I tell people I found this dangerous thing called hope. And when you have hope, it makes you dangerous. When you have hope, you see options where other people see barriers. When you have hope, you see possibilities where other people see closed in roads. When you have hope, you have energy to get up the next day and figure it out versus wanting to stay in bed and life go away. Like hope is dangerous. And so, as abstract as that seems, as fluffy as that sounds, it's a powerful force of energy when you have hope. And I had that then, and I came out of that psychiatric care facility like like Clark Kent becoming Superman,
Love it.
and I came out with this chip on my shoulder that I'm going to figure out my purpose. I'm going to figure out why I'm still alive. I'm going to figure out how I can add more good to the world. I'm going
Mhm.
to figure out how I can be myself. I did not survive all these suicide attempts, dark nights of depression, wanting to quit, throwing the towel, hating myself, losing my authentic voice to come out of those moments to experience the same life. I'm not going back to inauthenticity. I'm not going back to faking it till I make it. I'm not going back to being externally successful and being an inward failure. I'm not going back to allowing people whose lives aren't going anywhere to control the decisions that I make.
Mhm.
So I'm starting a new normal. And it's funny because we cling to the familiar, and I kept saying when I was going to counseling sessions and personal development conferences and trying to invest in myself and find myself, I kept saying, man, I just want to go back to normal, back to where I don't feel like every day is a new surgery. And I
Mhm.
realized that it was the old normal that led me to the place that I was in the first place. What I didn't need is to get back to normal. What I needed was to create a new normal with new habits, new beliefs, new disciplines that would create a life that I'd never experienced before.
Yeah, exactly. And that's amazing to hear, man, because all I can picture right now when you brought up the Clark Kent thing is just Darryl coming out of the doors of the hospital, throws his glasses, and then rips open his chest, and then there's the Superman sign right there. And
Yeah.
it's just the new man,
Yeah.
the new beginning, the new chapter. And
Yeah.
that's amazing, man, because I mean, there's a lot of people who go through those situations and like you mentioned, that they fall right back into that dark place and they're not
Yeah.
able to fully implement those lessons into their life until maybe another situation happens. But it's something
Hmm.
incredible that you've done as well after that experience to not only go towards a purpose of helping people, but I love what you've been doing with athletes as well. And you're the founder of an organization called Second Chance Athletes. And everybody can go and check it out at secondchanceathletes.com. But just explain a little bit about that organization and what really motivated you to start it.
I noticed that I was happier about my life and my future than my peers. I would talk to my colleagues, other teammates that I knew, athletes that I knew, even that didn't play with me, but like that my dad knew or was from Central or just saw me play AAU and was formed, whatever. I'm talking to all these athletes and I'm noticing that when they talk about their life, it's kind of like gray. It's like low energy, like what's going on in your life? Oh, just out here grinding, man. And I'm like, that sounds boring. But then we got to talking about sports, and they were like, "Oh man, you remember when we played Western and what's man? Remember you got that hit? Hey, Stitch, you remember when you chased down that running back from Eastern Michigan and like the energy shifted?" And I was like, "Hey, what's that about?" And I started to dig deeper, and I'm like, "Wow." People are living their current life as if it's second best to their former life as an athlete. Whatever I've done to invest in myself and find my purpose and be where I am in this moment is different than what they've done because I have a whole different mindset. I celebrate my accomplishments. I just don't live there, and I'm so excited about my future. I have not peaked. My best days are in front of me. They're not behind me. Yeah, I'm happy that I was a good athlete. I'm happy that I got to travel the U.S. I'm happy that I got to be on a MAC championship team. I'm happy that I got some newspaper articles, some medals, some trophies, won some dunk contests. Like I'm happy that I have all those experiences.
Mhm.
Uh, but my best days are in front of me. I've got more people to impact, more people to influence, more conferences to start, more speakers to coach, more athletes to help. Like my best days are in front of me. And so I was like, man, I
Yeah,
need to find something. So I started having conversations with them, started a blog, started some mentorship, and just kind of, took it one athlete at a time to figure out what was the best solution to help them create a better life.
I love it, man. And so how could people get involved?
Yeah, you can go to secondchanceathletes.com. I think there's all types of contact forms. There's a way for you to donate to the cause. We're going through a whole restructuring process on what we'll offer just because of the shift of now mental health is a thing. And so we're making some adjustments to make sure that we're still, because our vision is to be a solution hub so
Hmm.
that when you enter into our ecosystem, you have everything that you need through us or an affiliate partner, that you don't get lost in the cracks. I remember what it's like to go to get my x-rays at this hospital and then go have to fill out the same stupid paperwork at another hospital just to get an MRI, just to go to another hospital and fill out the same stupid paperwork just so I can get an epidural injection in my back. And what we're doing is saying like, hey, whether it's branding, whether it's speaking, whether it's mental health counseling, whether it is figuring out how to monetize your brand, whether it is learning how to develop spiritually, within us or within one of our partners, we're going to make sure that no athlete gets left behind. And that's where the kind of the term is like, hey, what does second chance athletes to do? We give former and forgotten athletes a second chance to succeed in life without the demands of sports.
I love it, man. Seriously. Anything that I can do to help promote or support that organization, I'm definitely in. And
Sweet. We would like
um,
$1 million check. So
I wish, bro. I wish, man. No, I'm definitely going to share this information with a lot of people around me, as well as different athletes that I know that
appreciate it.
are in the mental health space and are
Yeah.
former athletes that love to talk about this stuff, because it's really an amazing movement, man. It's something that needs to be
Thanks.
talked about way more.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Absolutely, my man. And I really appreciate you taking the time today to really share a lot of your experiences and your knowledge, because I believe that there's a lot of very rich information within this episode. And I hope people, come away from this episode learning a lot about, how to overcome rejection, as well as how to overcome challenges, and how you've been able to do it in such a positive light. And if you have not checked out Darryll yet, definitely go over to his Instagram and check out a lot of his short videos. They've been very helpful for me as well. And if you're not into a lot of the long form stuff, he has some great useful videos that talks a lot about what we talked about today as well. But Darryll, for the people that want to learn more about you and get involved with the amazing things that you were doing, where can they find you?
Go to DarrylStinson.com, hit your boy up, or social media, Stinson Speaks. Google my name, I'll pop up, and just reach out, connect. I'm approachable. I'll be happy to help, grab a conversation, see how we can get you moving towards your dreams, your goals, and living a more, mentally healthy and fulfilled life.
I love it, man. I love it. So definitely everybody go and check it out. I really appreciate you coming on, man. And I hope everybody enjoyed this episode.